Welcome to Creepshow, your home for exploring the strange, the eerie, and the forgotten. Today, we're diving into the dark corners of history to uncover some of the most twisted serial killers of the 19th century, names you've probably never heard of, but whose terrifying deeds are too chilling to be left in the past. From the gruesome story of Madame Delphine LaLaurie to the shocking mystery of the Servant Girl Annihilator, these are 10 cases you won't want to miss. So, sit back, brace yourself, and let's journey into a world where murder was at its most macabre. Number 10. Madame Delphine LaLaurie. Madame Marie Delphine LaLaurie was a well-known, alluring socialite who used to throw extravagant parties at her mansion in New Orleans' French Quarter. But behind that glamorous facade, she hid a dark and twisted secret. She tortured slaves for her own sadistic amusement. Authorities did intervene. They penalized LaLaurie, forcing her to sell her other slaves, and forbade her from accepting any more after a tragic incident when a little slave girl fell from the top of her home. But LaLaurie was cunning. She continued to purchase slaves through her social and familial connections, keeping her dark appetites well hidden. Then, one fateful night, early on April 10, 1834, a fire broke out in the kitchen of the LaLaurie mansion. When the fire department arrived, they discovered something horrifying. An old woman shackled to the stove. She revealed a chilling secret. Other slaves had been taken to the attic of the house and never returned. What they found in that attic would make your blood run cold. A torture chamber. Slaves were physically abused regularly. The horror of it all incited the people of New Orleans to outrage. A furious mob gathered outside the LaLaurie mansion, ready to tear it apart. But LaLaurie, she was gone. She fled to France, never to return. Some say she died there in 1842. Others claim it was 1849. What we do know is this: LaLaurie is believed to be responsible for at least 4 documented murders. Though many suspect, the number may be far higher. Her legend endures as one of the most twisted figures of the 19th century. Number 9. William Burke and William Hare. Scottish serial killers, William Burke and William Hare, were 2 men driven by greed and a disturbingly profitable opportunity. It all began with the unexpected death of one of Hare's lodgers. Hare still owed rent, but instead of paying up, he saw a chance to make money. He and Burke decided to sell the body to a private anatomy instructor at the University of Edinburgh who needed cadavers for scientific study. But that wasn't enough. Oh no! They soon realized there was more money to be made, and so they began a gruesome conspiracy. Burke and Hare started luring their victims, often poor, defenseless lodgers, or those who wouldn't be missed, back to their guest house. Once inside, they'd ply their victims with alcohol, enough to make them defenseless. Then they'd smother them, quick, silent, deadly. Before anyone noticed the disappearances, the bodies were sold to the university, feeding the demand for fresh cadavers. In total, Burke and Hare are believed to have killed 16 known victims, but it was the murder of one unfortunate soul, known as Daft Jamie, that brought about their downfall. Locals recognized Jamie's body, even after it had been sold, and that set off a chain of events leading to their arrest. When justice finally caught up with them, there was a catch. Hare escaped the hangman's noose. With the evidence against him weak, he was released, though history lost track of him. The last records suggest he made it to Ireland, but his fate remains a mystery. As for Burke, he wasn't so lucky. He was hanged on January 28, 1829, for his role in the grisly murders. And yet, the shadow of Burke and Hare's crimes still haunts Edinburgh and the world of science. What lines will people cross in the name of progress? Number 8. Liver-eating Johnson. Jeremiah Johnson, born in 1824 in New Jersey, is a name surrounded by eerie legends and chilling stories. Though he lived many lives as a logger, trapper, scout, and even a sheriff during the Civil War, he is best known for one thing: his brutal 15-year battle with the Crow Native American tribe. It all began in 1847, when tragedy struck. Johnson's wife, a member of the Flathead Native American tribe, was slaughtered by the Crow, and Johnson swore revenge. Legend has it, over the next 15 years, Johnson exacted his vengeance on the Crow people in the most gruesome way imaginable. He allegedly killed over 300 Crow warriors, but his revenge didn't stop there. He scalped his victims, and, in a final insult to the Crows' beliefs about the afterlife, he cannibalized their livers. Eating the liver was believed to be a direct affront to their spiritual beliefs, as it was considered essential for passage into the afterlife. This terrifying habit earned him the name Liver-Eating Johnson. His notoriety grew quickly. Stories of his merciless attacks spread far and wide, and he became a figure of both fear and fascination. After years of bloodshed and violence, Johnson's life of revenge finally ended in 1900. At the age of 75, after decades of survival and fighting, he passed away quietly at a veterans' home in Santa Monica, California. Though many of the stories about Johnson have become the stuff of legend, his name remains etched into the dark annals of the 19th century, a man driven by loss and consumed by a thirst for vengeance. Number 7. Jane Toppan, serial killer. Jane Toppan once made a chilling confession. "My dream was to kill more people, helpless people, than any man or woman who ever lived." Born in 1857 in Boston, Massachusetts, Toppan started her life as a nurse, but it wasn't long before she twisted her medical training into a deadly game. She would experiment on her patients, changing their recommended dosages, and, disturbingly, even sharing a bed with them while they were unconscious. Her deadly weapon of choice? Atropine and morphine. Toppan would administer lethal doses of these drugs, creating an unusually high number of deaths under her care. For years, her actions went unnoticed, the deaths written off as unfortunate medical complications. But, as the body count rose, so did suspicion. After an investigation, it was discovered that Toppan had been tampering with her patients' medications, using her position of trust as a nurse to carry out her twisted fantasies. Eventually, Toppan confessed to 31 deaths, but it's believed her actual number of victims may be far higher, between 70 and 100 people. Her motivation? Toppan revealed that she experienced a sexual rush as her victims slipped away, knowing they were dying at her hands. This led to her infamous nickname, the Angel of Mercy. Though many of her victims were defenseless patients, it wasn't just strangers who fell under her deadly spell. She poisoned friends, colleagues, even her landlords. In a final twist, Toppan successfully argued that her prior suicide attempts were proof of her insanity. This led to her being committed to a state mental institution, where she remained for the next 40 years. Jane Toppan died there, her twisted legacy forever etched in the dark history of medical murderers. Number 6. Wild Bill Longley. Known as one of the most lethal gunfighters in the Old West, Wild Bill Longley was a man whose life and death were shrouded in both violence and legend. Born in Austin County, Texas, in 1851, Longley claimed to have killed 32 men during his ruthless time on the frontier. But Longley's killings had a darker side. He targeted newly freed black men, robbing them of their horses and, in many cases, their lives. And because these victims were former slaves, many turned a blind eye to his heinous crimes. In 1870, Longley enlisted as a trooper in the mountains. But despite his enlistment, Longley's reputation for violence followed him. A former sergeant once described him as an idle boaster, a notorious liar, and a man of low instinct and habits, but tolerated on account of his decent nature, gift of gab, and excellent marksmanship. It was only a matter of time before Longley's luck ran out. His lethal actions eventually caught up with him, and he was sentenced to hang. The night before his execution, Longley wrote a letter to his brother stating, "I don't dread this at all. Tomorrow at this time, I'll be in a much better position." On the day of his execution, Wild Bill Longley met the hangman's noose. Or did he? Shortly after his death, rumors began to swirl. Longley's father claimed the execution had been staged, that a wealthy uncle had paid the sheriff $4,000 to fake the hanging. Supposedly, a special harness had been created to make it look like Longley had been hanged, while he escaped to freedom. For years, the legend of Longley's fake execution endured. That was until 2001. Historians exhumed the bones from the cemetery where Wild Bill was buried and confirmed once and for all the remains did belong to Longley. The mystery was put to rest, but the legend of Wild Bill Longley lives on. Number 5. Mary Ann Cotton. Mary Ann Cotton was one of England's most infamous serial killers, claiming the lives of at least 21 individuals, including 3 of her 4 husbands and 11 of her 13 children. Her method of murder? Arsenic poisoning. Cotton's horrifying scheme was simple yet effective. She poisoned her victims with arsenic and then collected on their life insurance policies. But her greed and cruelty didn't go unnoticed for long. When her stepson died under suspicious circumstances, police began to grow suspicious. Their concern deepened when Cotton rushed to the insurance company before even alerting a doctor to his death. As they dug deeper, they uncovered a chilling pattern. Cotton had traveled across England, leaving behind a trail of bodies, with almost all of her victims having supposedly died from mysterious stomach fevers. In the end, Cotton's web of lies and death unraveled. She was convicted of multiple murders, and her fate was sealed. In 1873, Cotton met her executioner, the notorious William Ong Calcraft. But her death was not a quick or merciful one. Calcraft used a short rope during the hanging, a method that ensured death came slowly and painfully. Instead of the neck breaking instantly, Cotton was left to choke to death, dangling in agony. Even Charles Dickens himself condemned the brutal process, calling it a dastardly craft. Though Cotton is long gone, her legacy as one of Britain's most calculating and cold-blooded killers remains. Number 4. Jesse Pomeroy. Jesse Pomeroy holds the dark title of being the youngest person in Massachusetts history to be convicted of first-degree murder at just 14 years old. But his violent tendencies started much earlier. Known as the boy torturer, Pomeroy's bloodlust was evident from a young age. At just 10 years old, he was already decapitating his mother's songbirds, a chilling precursor to the horrors to come. On Boxing Day in 1871, the body of 4-year-old William Payne was discovered, hanging from a rope inside an outhouse. But Payne wasn't Pomeroy's only victim. Over time, Pomeroy's attacks grew more brutal. He began targeting other boys, dragging them to isolated areas, holding their heads underwater, stabbing them with knives, and scratching at their skin with his nails. The brutality was shocking, even for the time. Eventually, Pomeroy's reign of terror caught up with him. After he nearly beheaded another 4-year-old boy, he was finally arrested. By the time authorities caught him, Pomeroy had tormented 8 boys, killed 2, and attempted to kill another. When asked what should be done with him, Pomeroy's chilling response was, "Put me somewhere. So, I can't do such things." The courts agreed. Pomeroy was sentenced to life in solitary confinement, but he narrowly avoided the death penalty. 2 Massachusetts governors refused to sign his death warrant, sealing his fate as a permanent prisoner. Pomeroy would go on to spend the rest of his life, 72 years, in solitary incarceration. His story remains one of the most haunting cases of child violence in American history, a stark reminder of how young, true evil can emerge. Number 3. The Servant Girl Annihilator. In 1884 and 1885, a shadow of terror fell over Austin, Texas. A serial killer, known only as the Servant Girl Annihilator, stalked the night, targeting sleeping women, and mutilating them in ways that still shock us today. The killer's brutal method? Dragging his victims out of their beds as they slept, and then murdering them with an axe. In total, the Annihilator killed 8 victims, 7 women and 1 man. But the horror didn't end there. 6 of these victims were found with sharp objects, horrifyingly lodged in their ears. A New York Times article described the killer as a cunning madman who is insane on the subject of killing women. Despite the gruesome pattern, the authorities were baffled. Over 400 male suspects were investigated, yet no arrests ever stuck. The killer's ability to break into homes where the servant girls slept, without detection, only deepened the mystery. And in Austin's black communities, rumors began to circulate. Many believed the killer was a white man with voodoo powers. How else could he sneak into homes unnoticed and escape without a trace? Even more unsettling, not a single guard dog was ever heard barking near the crime scenes. The Servant Girl Annihilator disappeared just as mysteriously as he arrived, and to this day, his true identity remains unknown. A dark chapter in the history of Texas, with no answers, only fear. Number 2. Amelia Dyer. One of Britain's most horrifying killers, Amelia Dyer was responsible for the deaths of an estimated 400 babies over a 30-year period, making her one of the most prolific serial killers in history. Dyer, a notorious baby farmer, preyed on desperate low-income single mothers who had nowhere to turn. She placed newspaper ads that promised hope. A healthy child would be adopted by a married couple without family. Lovely country home. Terms, $10. But behind those false promises lurked a monstrous reality. Instead of finding loving homes, Dyer took the infants and murdered them. Her methods were as cold as they were cruel. She would either strangle the babies or poison them with a cordial laced with opium. Once the infants were dead, she would discard their tiny bodies, often in the River Thames. Dyer's reign of terror lasted for years, until one chilling discovery in 1896. The body of a 15-month-old girl was found floating in the Thames. She had been wrapped in a brown paper package, and that package had a clue. Dyer's name and address were written on it. For years, Dyer had eluded capture by constantly moving from place to place. But this time, the authorities had what they needed. When they finally tracked her down, Dyer was charged with multiple murders. At 60 years old, she became the oldest woman to be executed in Britain since 1843. Amelia Dyer's execution marked the end of a dark chapter in British history, but the echoes of her horrific crimes still linger. A figure of terror, whose name is forever linked to the suffering of innocents. Number 1. The Bloody Benders. In the early 1870s, a family of serial killers known as the Bloody Benders terrorized Kansas, leaving behind a trail of blood and mystery. At least 11 known victims were murdered by this twisted family, John and Elvira Bender, along with their 2 children, John Jr. and Kate. Their home was a seemingly simple wood frame house, measuring just 16 by 24 feet. The front served as a grocery store, while the back hid something far more sinister, an illegal funeral parlor. As people in Labette County began disappearing, panic spread, leading the townspeople to call an emergency meeting. But by the time investigators arrived, the Benders had vanished. What they found inside the house was nothing short of horrific. The family had been luring guests into their home, murdering them, and burying the bodies. A trapdoor was discovered in the floor, a cunning feature that allowed the Benders to hide the bodies until they could bury them in the garden. When investigators dug up the garden, they unearthed 8 remains. Among the victims was an 8-year-old girl. But the horror didn't end there. 3 more bodies were found buried nearby, bringing the total body count to 11. And for all of this, the Benders had stolen just $4,500 from their victims. Despite the evidence, the Benders were never caught. They vanished without a trace, and their ultimate fate remains one of the most enduring mysteries of the American frontier. Thanks for joining us on this unsettling journey into the twisted minds of forgotten 19th-century serial killers. If you found this video intriguing, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you never miss any of the strange and sinister content we cover here on Creepshow. Do you have a dark story from history you'd like us to explore? Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, keep your curiosity sharp and your mind open, because the world is full of odd occasions waiting to be uncovered.